How are we doing today, guys? So today we're going to be talking about the strict pull-up or weighted pull-up. Now this is going to be focused around gymnastic style pulls, specifically with keeping the shoulders behind the bars so that we can gradually build to chest to bars and obviously strict muscle ups, as well as reinforcing shapes around the kipping positions. So this isn't specifically around hypertrophy or trying to bias a particular muscle per se. The focal point is actually more about focusing around maintaining midpoint around balance and midpoint around the bar, which we'll describe later. So how the video is going to go is that we're going to go through the setup in terms of how we want to be setting our hands, etc., and body position. Then we're going to be cueing through the movements and then going into variations at the end. So like we said, the initial focal point that we're looking for is setup and bias of balance around the rings around the bar. So by that I mean, if you have a center point, let's hypothetically say I was hanging on a bar right now. If I hang dead, my body's going to be relatively in line, hanging drop straight down from the bottom. From that position, we want to be thinking about creating a pull where the rib cage can move behind the bar. Now how we compensate for that is by having the legs hollowed out, tucking and holding the legs out in front. This allows us to hold the hollow to allow the shoulder blade to sit forwards and track down through the lats, keeping the forearm directly underneath the bar so that we sit in this sort of shape when we're up near the top of the rep. And then from there, obviously lowering back down to the full hang position. How we create that is going to be by using leverage and creating balance around the bar. So your body weight is about 50%, and from the belly button down is about 50% of your body weight, compared to above it, which is again about 50% of your body weight. So your hips are very close to that. Typically, where if we can keep our hips pretty much directly underneath the bar, it'll allow the torso to sit slightly back, legs to sit slightly forwards, and allow us to create that full movement within the shape that we're looking for, which is very dependent on the hollow. So the hollow shape that we're talking about is creating a tuck under with the hips by squeezing the glutes, which shortens the abdominals, allows the ribs and hips to connect and stay solid. From there, quad lock, and that's really important, pointing the toes, which also helps create tension down the leg. From there, it's going to allow us to shift the rib cage into flexion, which is going to allow us to drive the shoulder blade and a lat tension downwards, keeping the forearm vertical as we flex into that top wrist position. So that's the action that we want to be thinking about when we're doing this. Now, how we set that up. Hands, firstly, should be just outside the shoulder width. From there, you want to be thinking about creating a flexion or a false grip on top of the bar. So the knuckles are pretty much sitting directly on top. We're not talking full false or no thumb at all. We're talking about knuckles sitting on top of the bar or the rings. And that's going to allow you to create flexion here, which helps you drive biceps and lat tension, keeping the forearm vertical through the actual pull itself. So quite important. From there, we're looking at starting in our long arm position. By that I mean deliberately starting with deltoids pretty much touching the ears. Reason for that is it trains a full range of motion through the shoulder blade and teaches you to be able to get out of your kipping position strongly and effectively as you move. That's our setup. Going into the movement. So we want to be starting from that long, elongated shape with the wrist flexed. We want to be thinking about initiating tension with the elbow first. This creates a rotation through the humerus, but also creates a flexion in the shoulder, which allows the lat to have leverage to allow us to pull down. Now, it's not uncommon for that to be created with a slight thoracic extension. Now, that doesn't mean that you've lost your hollow shape, but the thoracic's going to extend, and then you're going to allow it to flex as you come up towards the top, which allows you to start to move around the bar. So, thinking about elongate, flex the wrist, fully hollowed, elbow initiates the movement. From there, the shoulder depresses down. From there, you can keep pushing, the forearm stays vertical the entire time. You pull down to the height to get the chin over the top of the bar. From that point, you've still maintained the hollow shape, and you initiate elbow first, shoulder relaxes at the top, and you've still maintained that hollow all the way through. So, idea is that shoulder stays behind the bar at all times until you're actually at the bottom of the rep again. Now, if you were to go to a chest to bar, that's where you'll be thinking about creating that slightly extra pull, and this is where things slightly change. If I'm going for a full chest to bar action, I'll pull down and you'll see the elbow flick back to start transitioning around the bar to pull into the chest. Now, big thing here is that you don't create that extension. So I don't want you thinking about pulling down and creating an extended position as you create that chest to bar. It's about maintaining that hollow shape throughout the entirety of the movement. So we're going to go into a demonstration. Obviously, chalk can be quite useful here for just maintaining grip on the bar. Now, when you're creating a deliberate chalk, you'll be create some white on the hands. Don't just like dab it on. You do actually want to create a little bit of anti-slip as you're doing that, but also soaking up sweat, particularly if you're in the middle of a workout. From there, I'm going to jump up. Now, you may not be very confident jumping up, in which case set up plates or a box so that you can step up and guarantee your grip to make sure that grip is exactly where you want it. From there, you hang long and get into your set position. So, I'll do this from behind. From there, knuckles over the top. From there, I'm hanging long. From there, I'm tucking the hips and hollowing. From that point, I'm going to drive the elbows down to pull over the top before returning and holding that hollow the entire time. Same thing again. Now, like I said, I maintain that hollow. As you initiate, you would have seen a slight extension, which allows for leverage of the lat and the bicep to create that initial pull, but I pulled back into flexion at the top of the rep and maintained that hollow throughout the rep. Okay, so if I was going for a chest to bar, like I said, all that would change there is that I'd pull a little bit further, and that's where you start seeing the elbow to start to change and start to transition backwards. Now, talking about variations on the pull-up, you have obviously underhand positions or neutral grips, in this case, neutral grips will be talked about on the rings versus on the bar. Obviously, if you've got bar with neutral grips, it works the same way. When we're talking about an underhand grip, the only thing that changes is the hand position. Now, obviously, you're going to be gripping underneath the bar and have the fingers facing towards you. Typically, the grip will narrow slightly because most people won't feel comfortable in that wide shape. So it'll go to about shoulder width rather than outside the shoulders. From there, everything stays the same. You're still going to be creating that elongated shape at the bottom. You're still going to be pulling through the elbow to initiate. It actually is really, really useful for training ribcage positions to actually teach you to hold that flexion shape. Forearms stay vertical, pull all the way to wherever you're going to. So again, if we're pulling to the chin, you stay here. If you're pulling to the chest, you'll start to get the elbow rotation backwards and retraction, but that does not change the hollow. If you pull through, you'll pull through and back, and you won't lose the hollow shape. You're not going to create an arch just to get to that chest to the bar. Make sense? So if I change that and go to the underhand grip, I'll face this time. That way you can see the variation, obviously on shoulder blades, etc. You'll see that the hands sit that little bit narrower. Still go fully long, still hollow out. From there, pull all the way up. So nothing else changes, literally just the hand position. It can be useful to train ribcage positions and better hollows. Now, final movement is is the neutral, which biases a lot more into lat positions, but also makes compression significantly easier. So this is quite useful for sports players in particular. So when we're using a neutral grip, rings are obviously great, allows the hands to move around. You can obviously superset things and do different variations on the rings as well, which creates better use. But with the neutral grip, all we're thinking about now is that everything drives down, everything compresses. Typically, you'll find you won't get quite as much height on these, and obviously there's no point transitioning because you wouldn't be able to transition over the top. So you typically don't do these to a full, chest to ring. This is more about creating compression and just the pull-up action itself. Same thing, you jump up, you're going to be less important about the false. However, it's still useful training it particularly if you want to be getting to top ring positions. So from that position, you're hollowed out. These rings are a little bit low for me, but from there, I'm going to hollow out. From there, I'm going to create that elbow initiation to pull and drive myself up into the top position before returning all the way down. Now, sometimes you can create rotations on those rings, which is what happened just then as I came down. However, if you're trying to hold neutral, you hold neutral the entire way. Other than that, those are the main variations of the strict pull-up. If you have any questions, flick us a message. Other than that, hope you enjoyed it.